What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to TTP Sports. And the Stanley Cup Finals are set right now as the St. Louis Blues, they are set to face the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Final, which is going to start in about a week. I think it starts next Monday, the 27th. And it's shaping up to be a pretty decent final, even after the pretty miserable playoffs we've experienced this year. So I kind of want to talk about, how lackluster this year's playoffs were, just how unexciting, uneventful they were, because you get the top teams in the East, like Tampa, like Toronto, like Pittsburgh and Washington. They're all eliminated in the first round. Pittsburgh getting swept, Washington losing in 7 to Carolina, Toronto losing in 7 in a heartfelt series against Boston, and then Tampa, one of the biggest upset stories in recent history. President's Trophy team near record breaking the previous record of the Detroit Red Wings for most points in a season. They get swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have never won a playoff series in their franchise history. So that happened right there. And then you also got teams from the West that get eliminated in the first round. Some top teams. You got Nashville being eliminated in the first round. Winnipeg, Calgary, the best team in the West, they get eliminated. Vegas gets eliminated. So it's pretty lackluster, I would say. Yeah, upset stories are good, like Carolina, like the Islanders. They're good in the moment, but as for ratings go for the NHL doesn't want teams like Carolina, they don't want teams like the Islanders to make it past the second round. They want teams like Tampa, they want Washington, they want Pittsburgh in the conference final, Stanley Cup final, because it's good for ratings, it's good to get people to watch the games. But so it was basically what all the top teams in the East eliminated. This was Boston's year to get to the Stanley Cup final. This was Boston's Stanley Cup final to lose. So but the NHL was basically praying Boston made the finals, so at least they would get some revenue with a Boston franchise in the Stanley Cup final. And then you get the St. Louis Blues, who at the mid part of the NHL regular season, they were one of the worst teams. They fired their head coach. The team just wasn't clicking whatsoever. They were having fights during practice. You get interim head coach, who was assistant coach Craig Berube. He comes in. They call up Jordan Binnington from their AHL affiliate. He gets his first start in December against the Philadelphia Flyers. He shuts them out, and the St. Louis Blues just ride that momentum from that start, especially Jordan Binnington, who has become a really gigantic story in the NHL since his first start in the National Hockey League. His first shutout, he goes on to be one of the biggest rookies of the season, even surpassing Carter Hart. So Jordan Binnington, I think he finished the season with a goals against average below 2 and a save percentage at least above 930. He was just phenomenal for St. Louis. That's all St. Louis really needed, because I always thought St. Louis was a good team going into the regular season. They just needed a goaltender because they had the defense, they had the offense. They just need a goaltender because Jake Allen just wasn't doing it enough for them. The previous tandem of Jake Allen just wasn't cutting it out. So they call up Jordan Binnington, they just give him the start because why not? And they just ride the momentum from there. So they just also ride the momentum through the playoffs as they beat Winnipeg, they beat Dallas in 7 games, they beat San Jose in 6 games. So it's just the momentum they riding it right now through the Stanley Cup final, and this is shaping up to be a pretty decent final, which hopefully makes up for the lackluster Stanley Cup playoffs. So, and also an interesting fun fact between St. Louis and Boston, out of the 4 major sports leagues, the NFL, the NBA, the Major League Baseball, and the National Hockey League, St. Louis and Boston as cities, they've met each other 11 times in their each respected final. So this is the 11th time Boston will face St. Louis in any of the 4 finals, and it's the most between any two cities in, I wouldn't say the United States, I guess in North America. So they have a nice little rivalry going for them right there. So I kind of want to give my predictions for this final. So you got St. Louis riding the hot streak of Jordan Binnington and their offense scoring from basically all 4 lines, and their defense just being pretty solid. St. Louis, they go after you, they get into the deep the hard to reach areas. They get in deep, they hit you, and they make you tired, and they make you work. And that's how St. Louis won each of their series. That's how they beat San Jose. They made San Jose work. They exposed San Jose's weaknesses, and that's why they're in the Stanley Cup final. Boston, even though it was basically like, can Boston not be a one-line team in the playoffs for once? And that showed right here. Boston's four lines, they're starting to all click together right now. They're all starting to chip in for offense. And Tuukka Rask has just basically been unbelievable, especially in the series against the Carolina Hurricanes. He stole that series for Boston, playing phenomenally in Carolina. He was basically unbeatable, and hope maybe he can ride his hot goaltending into the Stanley Cup final. So, as for predictions go, I think this is going to be a very tight series. I think it's basically going to be back and forth, with St. Louis being the better road team because their record shows in the playoffs they have been the better road team than at home. So maybe St. Louis can win a game or two in Boston, but then you also got to manage Boston may win a game or two in St. Louis because Boston has been a very good road team as well in these playoffs. So the playoffs start Monday, May 27th, and I think Game 7 is at least, I think, June 9th. I would think so. Maybe June 9th, maybe a little after June 9th. I think Game 6 is June 9th. So as for how many games this series is going to go, I'm going to predict at least 6 or 7 games. And I do think the St. Louis Blues just get on top of the Boston Bruins and they finally win their first Stanley Cup in franchise history. And also, this is the St. Louis Blues' first appearance in the Stanley Cup final since 1970 when they lost to Boston. So this is also building on that little bit of a rivalry between St. Louis and Boston. So I think it's just a very good, heartfelt story for the St. Louis Blues being one of the worst teams in the middle of the season to making the playoffs on a tremendous hot streak from their team and Jordan Binnington. So I just think that they're just going to continue to ride the hot streak into the Stanley Cup final, and I think they're going to give it to the Boston Bruins, and I think they can win this series within 6 or 7. So with this prediction, I'm probably totally screwing St. Louis, and Boston's going to win in 4. So who knows what's going to happen? The Stanley Cup finals are unpredictable. So what are your guys' thoughts on this Stanley Cup final? Who do you think is going to win? Who do you think is going to come out on top? So don't forget to leave a comment, don't forget to leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.